Welcome to Voice by Vinexposium, where the global wine and spirit community shares insights, stories, and expertise. Voice is your platform, your stories, and your voice.
Hello, I'm Anne Burchett, wine marketing and communication specialist, and this is Voice by Vinexposium. Voice by Vinexposium deals with the topics that matter in the wine and spirit world. Today, I'm talking to Pauline Vicard, co-founder and executive director of Areni Global, Christian Wylie, CEO of Bodega's Garzon in Uruguay, and Clément Desbois, sales director at Hillebrand, Gori, France. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, Anne.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us.
Sustainability is a fairly recent concept, first defined in 1987 by the United Nations as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainability in wine is even more recent, and progress was quick in most developed countries. Yet in 2022, consumers worldwide began pulling back on sustainable choices. Recently, the United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement. So one of the questions we're going to explore today is sustainability threatened? Christian, you work with clients worldwide. Pauline, you also have a global perspective on the world of wine. What's going on? Are we heading for disaster? Could you please give us a state of the nation address on where sustainability is at the moment? Ladies first.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for such an interesting question to start with. I'll go back to the definition that you gave, and I think that might be a reason why, sustainability is challenged or very much questions in the wine industry at the moment. But it's also because a lot of people think that the current notion of sustainability is not going far enough or fast enough. So I think in the definition you gave, it was just like, maintaining what we do without threatening the future generation. A lot of people now are at the stage that, maintaining what we do is not enough. We need to actually try to reverse the cycle and try to really leverage viticulture and agriculture to improve everything. So there were so many things in your introduction and your question that I'm trying to answer them all. But sustainability is challenged by some because it's not going to be far enough, by some because they can't find a return on investment on all the things that they do to improve or maintain, and by some because it's very, very hard to think green when your numbers are red. And in the economic context in which the wine world finds itself at the moment, where everything from cost of doing business to threatening regulation, decline in consumption, when people have so many fires to put down, there was a great quote by Johan Reinecke, a sustainable, even more than sustainable winemaker in South Africa. And he was saying, when you look at the different aspects of sustainability, you can probably screw up the planet for the longest, people the second longest, but the minute that your numbers are red, the minute your financial sustainability is compromised, then it stops that minute. And we are in that period where it's going to be even more complicated financially for many people. So there's different reasons for which I think you're right. We are at an interesting crossroad.
So a bit of a crunch point where maybe we're not going far enough, maybe we're going too far, but everybody needs to regroup and think again.
What I was trying to say is I don't think the wine world doesn't see the value or the need for being more sustainable or even further. I think the way sustainability is going to be prioritized in everybody's agenda is going to be very much influenced by the resources that they have available.
That makes complete sense. Christian, what's your vision on that?
I'm an optimistic because I don't really like the alternatives. I think a disaster is too big a word. It's a disruption, and I think it's healthy, and it needs to be part of the philosophy of your business. Mm-hmm. If it's integrated in your philosophy, then everything you're doing, every little light you're turning off and saving energy will actually help your bottom line, and it will help the climate or the planet, and eventually the business. I think some people think that by making something organic or biodynamic or sustainable, they will get an extra price. And that's not true. So it has to be a philosophical approach. It has to be one of the pillars of your business. And then it makes a ton of sense.
And do you think that because this philosophical approach is not necessarily well understood, do you think that's a reason why some people are frustrated with sustainability?
Yes, because a lot of people 20 years ago started, for example, buying green bonds to get to be carbon neutral delivery. And you were planting forests in Patagonia or windmills in Turkey. And they thought they were going to get better business. Yeah. It was just a marketing thing. It was like green dollars. That will never work. It has to be from the essence of the whole project, the whole business thinking, the philosophy that makes it sustainable or makes it possible. If you think this will give you a blue, deep ink blue line bottom numbers, it will, but you have to believe in it, and it has to be the philosophy of your company, of everybody working in the company.
So sustainability is not a magic key. It's something that can be pushed further, and it's something that's challenged when figures don't add up.
Exactly.
I think that's a good summary of what both of you said. Clément, in wine, obviously there's vast expanses of territories to traverse. So transport is absolutely essential. And very often when people look at their carbon footprint, the weight of the product and transport is a key part of the carbon footprint. So can you give us an update of where transport companies are in terms of sustainability?
Absolutely. So all transportation company, freight forwarders, carriers, we are fully aware that our mission is to reduce the CO2 emission of the shipments. So everybody has a very high commitment to their board, to their customer. So for us, it's key. We don't really see any future for transportation company who are not going to take this approach under consideration. And for the wine and the spirits, I would say that I'm very confident, because if you compare to other commodity, there is really a request from exporters in order to find a better solution in order to decrease CO2 emission. So we are very confident. And also we can see, for instance, in Europe, there is quite some regulation about that. All the major carriers have to change their vessel in order to consume less. They all know that they order a new vessel in order to match the new regulation, and we see that those boats are ready to burn much cleaner fuel than they are doing today. And we can work also on some other options that we are going to discuss later. There is some solution, not necessarily with a very high price. So the idea is to give full visibility to the customer and to see how he can choose and adapt between the lead time, the price, and the CO2 emission.
So maybe a slightly unfair question. Who's driving change? Is it your clients asking for it? Is it the regulatory environment? Or is it the companies themselves going, we need to be shining lights in the world of sustainability?
It depends, but the driver, as usual, it's the customer.
Yeah.
And in the wine and spirits, as you know, the main sales term is XLRs.
Yeah.
So usually it's the importers who
Yeah.
decide, who pay, and so then decide which options they are going to take. So it's more, let's say, the market than the production area who can drive, even if today, the feeling and the needs and the wish, let's say, is more on the exporter side, because they work on their area, on their ground. So it's why we have to find the right balance and to educate also a little bit everybody. Sorry.
Okay. Another aspect of sustainability is that obviously it's happening in all sorts of different sectors at the same time. And I suppose we're privileged in wine because what we produce is not indispensable to life. So we maybe have a little bit more maneuvering space, a little bit more headroom than others. And some industry leaders have actually stated officially that they see wine as having the duty to be a leader to the rest of agriculture in the sustainability field. What's your view on that? Do you want to be a leader and show the light to all the others? Lead by example.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I think that's the key. Again, if you believe in what you're doing and you're doing it properly, and it's sustainable, you lead by example.
Yeah.
Not just in the marketplace, but also in the workforce. And you educate everybody to be responsible with the biodiversity, with the life of the soil, with the shipping. We had a fantastic an anecdote with the big boards drive change, the Nordic monopolies or the Canadian boards. And we had the president of the LCBO concerned about not being able to get our wines to Toronto, to Ontario, and they came to the booth with Gori to find a solution. So I think the problem sometimes is not the boards that have this mega commitment. Sometimes the middlemen are only on the business side and not necessarily concerned on sustainability. So that's somewhere that we can always work. But it's not a duty. If you try to force it, if you try to mandate, people are going to work a way around it. You have to believe it. It has to be a philosophy, and then you lead positive. You're a positive leader by example, and then things, magic starts to happen. People find out today is easy to communicate. And people, it has to be a genuine, sustainable product, because otherwise people will read through the cracks with Instagram or with any of the social media. They find out very quickly who is for real and who is just lip service.
So Bodega Garzon is one of the winery that is known for its stance on sustainability. Have you had examples of competitors or friends in the business coming to you and saying, can we have a chat? How do you do that? Is there anything that you would be willing to share?
Yes, all the time. And in the beauty of the wine industry is that there are no secrets. There are a few mysteries, but there are no secrets.
It's a good one.
And we share, not just with the wineries, but even with the marketplace. And we're always trying to look for solutions. I mean, it's such a subjective product that you need to help each other. And when Don Alejandro Bulgeroni, when the owner of Garzon, made the upfront investment of building the first 100% LEED certified winery in the world, that was 14 years ago. In between, I find myself walking around the winery and meeting other producers like Alegra Antinori, and she's like taking notes. So what are you doing? No, we're building a winery, and we want to make it sustainable. And how do you do the green roofs, and how do you take care of the water and the energy and the clean energy? So there's a lot of communication and sharing how to do it.
So within the wine world you're sharing, are you sharing beyond the wine world? Sorry, I'm pushing you on this one.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I think that's what we're doing here today. The voice that I think that Vinexposium is brilliantly capturing is how do we all work together with the opinion leaders and the transportation, because it's the future is the only way. And the things like we're starting to do to preserve the microbiology of the soil is we're testing spraying with drones. But mostly because we don't want to pass the tractor in between the rows.
Not compacting the soil.
So there you're talking to, Silanti, so the name of the company that owns Fiat and Holland American, etc. And they will, Holland American is cruise ships, so it's a different company. But
them,
they want to. They're
Yeah.
talking to you. So how do we do it? Do we put like green batteries so the tractors are electric? We have to work another way.
Yeah.
And I think with including AI, it's happening. And it's happening in forestry, it's happening in soy sauce. Some other crops are easier to adapt technology than wine, but it's coming. It's coming, and it's fascinating.
Pauline, going back to the original question, would you say that the wine industry is a leader in the field of sustainability and an example to other agricultural sectors?
It has to be. For me, it's a necessity. There's different reasons for this, but I totally agree with the people you mentioned saying that we have to lead the way there. You also mentioned that we are not mandatory to life, like we're not a survival production. Which the French people like to challenge, but it's kind of true. Like if you have to choose between eating and drinking wine, at one point you will choose to eat. So I think that's one of the reasons first, because we are not necessary. We have to prove that we are not using land and resources for, in the wrong way. We have to prove ourselves worthy of that space. And there will be a time, and it's already here in many countries where, crops and people fight for water. So we can't justify the use of arable land and the use of water if it's not for at least being sustainable in what we do. The second thing is viticulture is the rich uncle of agriculture when you look at it.
Yes.
I'll give the number for France because we're in France, but the difference between a farmer that works with cattle, the farmer that works with cereals and a farmer that works with grapes, there's a 4 to 5 times difference in the monthly average of what those farmers are making, the cattle farmer being the least wealthy, profitable, and more at risk financially. So if we are the rich uncle of agriculture, we cannot be not leading the way, not just for viticulture, but for agriculture in general. And one of the things that's really interesting, and you kind of touched it on it, Christian, I'm doing it the French way, is that
Sounds better.
is that viticulture is really interesting for a lot of the sustainability aspects, because when you plant a vine, and you will know better than I do, you plant for 30, 50, 100 years. When you do beetroot, and we've done a bit of work with, the beetroot farmers, they rotate the culture 2 or 3 times a year. So it gives them different challenges, different opportunities. But for us, we have to have it right, and we have to have it for the long term. So there's a lot of solutions like drones or different. Like when you put them in viticulture, the stakes are different because you're here for the very, very long term. And the soils that you have, you will only manage it with one main, cultivation, one main culture. So for all of those reasons, there's absolutely no excuse for us not to lead the way in that, and to continue sharing with other aspects of agriculture, because we have a lot to invest. We've been investing a lot. Like you've presented sustainability as something new, but 30 years of research in this, we do have a lot of data, we do have a knowledge, and there's no reason for us not to lead the way.
Yeah, and I like the point you made about access to water, because I think that access to water, not me personally, but people who work a lot in the field of sustainability know that access to water is going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward for all forms of agriculture. So if we want our place at the table, we need to be not just rich uncles, but good boys and girls.
And land as well. If you look at the theory of sustainability behind agriculture, that's a work we've done with Chatham House, the geopolitics think tank based in London. There's 2 main theories about how you see sustainability in agriculture. And I could have mentioned this with your first question. And one of the reasons it's challenged because it's 2 different mindset and 2 very different vision of the world. It's either you think that tomorrow, because there will be more of us, we need to produce more. So that gives you one version of sustainability where you fence nature and you separate the agricultural plot, and your lever is technology, because you need to produce more with less, right? So technology will be here for you to help you. But you can also believe, and you can also have a vision of the world that says it's not because we are more tomorrow, that we need to produce more, we need to produce differently, or we need to different better. And so in that vision of the world, then agriculture is not fenced out of nature, it's integrated with nature. And it's all those vision of regenerative agriculture and viticulture and etc. and polycultural activation. But in both, in that scenario, or of we have to actually fence out nature and increase the production with less resources, there could come a point, even in regulations, where, you know, people are like, well, we kind of need to decide what's planted where, because we need to make sure that people have got enough food. And I'm not saying that we are going to come back to a, you know, Sovietic use of the land, but there could be a time not that far away where, you know, big regulators like Europe favor crops over others.
Yes.
And again, you know, linking it to my point about we are not a survival crop.
Yeah.
We really need to show that we are doing the best that we can, not only to not create harm, but to do good and to drive that train.
That we're good
Sorry, that was a very, very
No,
long,
I understand. That we're good managers of natural
Yes.
resources.
Exactly.
So you also mentioned the concept of rich uncles. I really like that. So I'm not going to call you a rich uncle, but I remember you explained to me when we first talked on the phone that Bodega Garzon was conceived from the outset like a sustainable winery. But that doesn't come cheap. And maybe you'd like to share a few figures or length of investment with us. Does that mean that, yes, you told me that the LEED certification, it would take 50 years to pay it off. So is it possible for all wine producers to commit to sustainability, or is it just reserved for premium brands and a few happy, lucky people?
No, it's everybody can do it. The smaller, it's actually easier.
Yeah.
And it's less capital intensive if it's a smaller project. A lot of people, get overwhelmed when it's a big project. It's how am I going to do this in order to be carbon neutral and to be long-term sustainable? From the offset, Mr. Bulgaroni, together with Alberto Antonini, planned the viticulture and the construction of the winery to be as sustainable as possible. Mm-hmm. So the water management in a place where we have 1,200 millimeters of rain a year. It's like Seattle. It's almost twice Bordeaux, but we have to drip irrigate because we have so much wind from the Atlantic, and the mother rock is like a sponge. So it dries out in 3 or 4 days. We become in water deficit. So we collect rainfall and we use that to irrigate. But in the winery, we actually recycle all our water in the green roofs. It's the largest green roofs in South America, 7,000 square meters. And obviously, we treat the effluents of the winery. That's an angle that I think every producer in the world knows, because it's mandatory for now 30 or 40 years to treat the effluents of the winery. Some people just do it by decantation in a little lake. We actually reuse the water. We end up potabilizing it and using it again. So the view of Mr. Bulgaroni and the view of Garzon is this is a legacy project that has extra virgin olive oil and high quality wine. They're both foods. They both make you happy. They enhance your meal, and they are hundreds of years in the lifespan of the project. So when he builds his winery, that it's about 5 acres or 2 hectares, the building. If you verticalize it, it's a tower of 60 floors. But by doing it LEED certified, the investment was 20% higher.
Yeah.
Because you need all the sky windows for the natural light. You cannot affect the landscape, so you need to construct the building around the hill. You, of course, use gravity flow for all the wine to avoid pumping, and it crosses the philosophy of winemaking. But we're also being sustainable. We're not using energy. And at the end of the day, you use 2/3 of the building materials are local, so you don't have a very long, carbon negative transportation of materials. At the end of the day, that investment up front is $12 million more than what it would have cost you. And that's
Just $12 million.
Just 12 million. And that's what you recover in 50 years.
Yeah.
But when you're doing the project for centuries, it's just the first 50 years. I mean, the French, every French producer, every chateau with a reputation, they will tell you that the wine industry is wonderful, except for the first 200 years. And in the case of Uruguay, the rich uncle, it's actually the cattle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
oh, interesting.
Yeah. The main production in Uruguay is grass-fed, natural pastures, beef. They're profitable, and we are trying.
That's a very good explanation. Pauline, would you say that finding these extra $12 million
Easy
is possible for all? No, I'm being facetious. More seriously, what's the view of your organization on whether even smaller winery can afford this sustainability efforts?
I don't know if it's easier for a smaller project, because of course not everyone. I think when you have a lot of financial resource, that's really the minimum that you can do, right? If you can, you have. It's that kind of thing.
If you have the 12 million.
If you have the 12 millions, you invest it that way. And think very long term, and thank God for even people with money that continue to, think very long term. When you're a smaller structure, you're a family-sized winery in France. For example, France is a very good example, is that I think you can play with other levers that are not just financial, but one of the advantages that I believe we might have had over Uruguay, for example, is the concentration of people, the concentration of knowledge, the access to many things. I think in particular, one of the conversations that I have is all the choices that we have in the plant material, what we can choose in terms of rootstock, what we can choose in terms of grape variety that we can plant, and all the research that has been done in very old pre-phylloxeric grape variety. This is something that sometimes winemakers of the new world, for a lack of a better term, don't have access to, because not all those plant materials are accessible. Research centers, I think, are well spread all over the world, and like university have loads of resources. But I think if you don't have the 12 million extra, because you mentioned an extra, so it's not, there's more, you have to play it collective.
Yes.
And you have to have a very strong will, and you have to play it collective. And there are some structures for this. I mean, we have a lot of collective structures in France and in the rest of Europe to think.
Very true. In the Centre-Loire, for example, there is Sepsicavac, which has done studies on Massal selection, and they share all their findings. They give access to the wine growers. No independent wine grower could conduct these surveys and work on, producing new wine plants, etc. And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Play it collective if you don't have the dollars.
I was even thinking of the structure of the appellation d'origine contrôlée that are very often criticized for some very valid reasons, but in the best ones, in the one that function the best. What they've done is that they've really created those space where the winemakers of a given region can come together and actually discuss those topics and share. So we're still not the best at sharing sometimes in Europe. I think there's loads of regions where people are more used to this, but maybe because of the necessity, what's in English, the necessity is the mother of goodwill or something. I think people are sharing more and more, and actually having big companies leading the way and showing that it's possible. People are going to walk next door and say, oh, what are they doing?
Yes.
Maybe I can do it myself.
You mentioned that it can't be done in the New World. We've done it in my previous challenge in Chile with Santa Carolina. I was one of the first producers in Chile that brought the Cabernet Sauvignon and the selections of Cabernet Sauvignon. And we started a heritage block rescuing varieties that came before phylloxera to South America through Uruguay. Everything came through the port of Montevideo. Some varieties were not good with the humidity, like Malbec ended up in Mendoza. And some needed long ripening seasons like Cabernet Sauvignon and Carmener ended up in Chile. And we started looking in the old vineyards for material that is pre-phylloxera. And once we found some, we said, okay, we need help from the research centers from the universities. We started a project with UC Davis, University of California, Davis. They were doing all the DNA traceability, and we found varieties like Romano, that's the father of Pinot Noir, that came to Uruguay, together with Mr. Bachelet, who's a great-grandfather of Lady President. So it is happening, and it is the first thing we had to do was register that heritage block of selections with the bank of genoma, so everybody can access, not just Chile, everywhere. If you want the material, so it is happening all over. It is I think driven by winemakers or viticulturists. Actually, the winemaker, basically his role is not to make any mistakes. Not to.
We go back to what you were saying earlier when you said in the wine train there are some mysteries but no secrets. And I think that's true because wine professionals tend to share quite a lot. Going back to you, Clément, we've talked about the cost of setting up a sustainable operation. What about transport? Is it a massive investment? Can it be amortized over a number of years? How does that work out when the decisions are made?
No, it's not necessarily an investment for us. If you look at the solutions which are already available, and can give you a few examples. For instance, rail in France are pretty good. The port of Le Havre and Fos-sur-Mer are well deserved from southwest area, Bordeaux, Cognac, and from Burgundy, for instance. And you can reduce the CO2 emission you can divide it by 10 by using rail in France because it's all electrified. And this is not necessarily cost more. And the point is to play collective again. This is, I think, really the key. Because, for instance, if you play collective with a supplier, even if you will get the right vessel for the consignee, but by loading one day earlier, for instance, you can catch the train instead of the rail. So this is the kind of solutions that we can have. Also, the biofuel for the road is not that expensive. It's not such extra cost compared to the CO2 reduction. You can get between 60 and 90% of CO2 emission, and the extra cost will be, 8% of the cost of the inland.
And no huge investments are needed to.
No, we need to align also with our supplier because our truckers need to invest. So we have to give them some visibility, and we have to commit with them in order to help them to support the investment. So it's why it's part of our vendor policy to add the point that we want to switch to biofuel with them, and we take the time in order to improve the footprint and the impact. For instance, on all our pickups that are done in all the French wine area, we picked up 43% in 2023. We reached 50% last year, and we have a plan in order to be able to do 100% pickups by biofuel in the next 2 years.
Okay.
And we can add more and more options. Yeah. So the key for us is to give visibility to our customer between the lead time, the price, and the CO2 reduction. So depending on all the options that we have.
So clearly, there's still some investment needed to go sustainable, and that has to have an impact on price, the end price, the consumer price. So is a price premium inevitable for sustainable goods?
No. The consumer won't pay you a premium.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem. People were led to believe that they were going to get more money if they became sustainable, organic, biodynamic.
Yeah.
I've never seen it. I've never seen a premium price. I have seen some gatekeepers prioritize sustainability and access to some whole countries, like, for example, Norway, are dependent of if you have a product that is sustainable with different kinds of certifications. But if your philosophy is to be sustainable, you look for ways that achieve both the bottom line and sustainability. So Garzon is in the middle of nowhere. So we have a fleet of people that have to drive in and out every day. Instead of buying the car and paying the insurance and paying the circulation permit, we changed the whole fleet to rentals of electric cars. And in a year, we're saving like hundreds of thousands of dollars. The cars are not ours. We don't have to pay for maintenance. We don't have to pay for registration. And all they do is basically they come to work, they charge the car, and they go back home.
But what about the impact on the final price?
This is saving.
Yeah.
So you're working your margin from your costs. You're not going to get a benefit. I haven't seen it getting a benefit from the actual price. You can aspire to a higher price with higher quality. And that is what we're doing. We're in a great terroir, and we're expressing the place, and we're being very genuine and crossing sustainability with quality. So, for example, oak aging, that a lot of people have hundreds of thousands of barrels in Spain, let's say, small barriques. I've been in Garzon 9 years, and I haven't bought one small barrique.
Yeah.
We only use big barrels, and you can use them 5,000 liters. You can use them for 20 years, not like a barrique that you use for 3 years. So it's like 20 to 1. Also, the energy you need or the people you need to work the cellar. And at the end of the day, it's you're basically saving or using as little as possible the forests of Wylie in France, because you have 5% of the oak that other producers are using.
Yeah.
And you cross that with our philosophy. We do not want to put makeup, because we're making wine in a beautiful place. And we have the natural fingerprint of our own microflora in the winery. And then we don't need the wine to have, it's caramel and vanilla and whiskey lactona. That's not from the vineyard. And you don't toast the barrels age longer. So you start crossing quality and philosophy with saving. And what you can ask any CEO in any winery in the world, what is your biggest fight with the owners or with the board of directors? The investment in barrels, the investment in oak. Every year you have to present a budget. The biggest fight is the investment in French oak or American oak. If you want to be sustainable, if you want to express the place, if you have a philosophy that integrates everything, I've never had a fight for over investing in oak, because it's 5% of what it should be.
Yeah. So, Pauline, what's your view on that?
I was smiling because we haven't prepped together, but I could almost have done the exact same answer, I don't think. We particularly study the fine wine space, so define it how you want, but the top of the pyramid in terms of price. And I agree more. I don't think people will pay you a premium because you are organic or sustainable. They will pay a premium for quality. And the good thing is, it seems that a lot of people, by improving what they were doing, also improve their quality. So it seems to be very, very linked. I also smiled because I totally agree that, to me, sustainability is going to become like the baseline. It's almost already the baseline for fine wine. Like consumers don't really care that much when it comes about sustainability for the top category. I think we could discuss for the rest of the category. They're not going to, stop buying, the classics and Petrus or for whatever, if we had to tell the name. If they were not sustainable, they will stop buying it if there was like a big scandal. But so far, as of today, and that might change tomorrow, they're not going to, stop buying the top estates if they're not sustainable. What we've seen, and you were totally right in the gatekeepers, is that
If I may interrupt you, but the top estate are moving to sustainability off their own bat.
Yes.
So they don't have to, but again, we go back to the leading by example.
Yes, they don't have to for the. I think they're all convinced that they have to just because it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
And as you were saying, it's the best stand that you can take on sustainability. You do it because you're also convinced that if you don't do it, you won't be able to produce those amazing wine in 50 years.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of hurting your capital in the long run. It's decreasing the value of your capital, and then your land and your estate is not worth the same thing. So it's not just because they are nice people, most of them are, but it's also because it makes a real good economic decision to be sustainable, because you need to be able to continue to produce those wines in 30, 40, 50 years. And there's no real other way to do that but then being sustainable. They don't need to do it for the consumers in the way that when it comes to buying those wines, that's all the studies that we've been doing. People don't really care about a fine wine being sustainable. It's not the main reason for which they're buying a luxury good in wine. It might change, but so far it's not. But it is for the gatekeepers, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And
it's become the baseline for premium wine, isn't it?
For a lot of them, they will maybe have a different programs of pushing the wines on the wine list if they are sustainable. And what we've seen, what was really interesting after COVID, when restaurants had to diminish the number of SKUs they were working with, and they had X amount of wine from a region, loads of sommeliers actually just chose to work with the ones that they understood to have the most sustainable approach. Maybe not the ones that had the most sustainable approach per se, but their understanding was those estates were most sustainable. So we often get to the question about communication. So far for the end consumer, not that important. For everyone in the supply chain, very important. It's going to be more and more important to convince them to list, your wines. And of course, extremely important for, the bottom line and the value of your capital if you don't want to decrease the economic value of what you're farming. Yeah,
I like that idea very much, because I think the best explanation ever I had about why did you become organic was a grower in Sancerre. He had very steep vineyards, and he explained to me that his father, very enthusiastically in the 70s, had started farming with, pesticides, herbicides, the lot, and he was very happy for a couple of years. And then when the rain came, all the soil was coming down, and they had to pick up little plastic buckets and bring them back. And, these guys were just watching what was happening and going, that can't be right. And that's exactly what you describe. It's that idea that in order to protect our investment or land or assets, we need to change the way we farm. And they've done it, and they're not even biodynamic, I think.
And then you can go, well, you need to protect your land, you also need to protect your people.
Yeah.
So I come from Burgundy, and we have that, my dad's generation is the one that started spraying without any type of protection and used, pesticides because it was modern at the time, because it's the way you were showing off money when you could, use more than what you needed, because pesticides are expensive and herbicides are expensive. Not being too dramatic, but the amount of people that suffered from a lot of disease after as well, either the owners themselves or the people that were working in the vineyards. I think in terms of sustainability now, if you want to find people, finding people who want to come and work in vineyards in the land is difficult enough that you don't offer them a safest environment possible to work on that land. You're going to struggle even more. So even if you don't want to act as the good guy, just if you want to find people to recruit and work on your estate, you also need to go sustainable, I think.
Manpower is increasingly, access to water we've talked about, but manpower is a big issue. I was absolutely delighted to see at the Vidor that the coup de cœur, the jury special mention went to Vignerons Engagés, because what they've done, devising a program for wine growers to work in extreme heat was not only useful, but crucially needed. So, and again, it's a collective initiative, so it's very circular.
The biodiversity is is incredible. Some people compare Garzon to like a mini Jurassic Park. And we have...
Dinosaurs?
Like me, yes. But when we're pruning in winter, you don't have the leaves, you're actually surrounded by ostriches. And we have in the lakes, we have a lot of carpinchos and capybaras. And there's many different kinds of deer and wild boars and foxes and a lot of things. And the big iguanas, the lagartos that take care of the snakes. And there's a wonderful biodiversity. And by not using chemicals of synthesis, they're all living in the vineyard. I mean, it is inconvenient when the carpinchos that have an incredible nose, and we decide, okay, tomorrow we pick the Pinot Noir,
And
the
they pick
next morning there's 2 rows are missing. It's incredible how they know when it is the sweetest moment to go in. But we are very concerned about the biodiversity, not just the human aspect of using pesticides or chemicals, but also the biodiversity in the farm. And I think when people come and experience the winery, the vineyards, and they go out on a picnic and they're like, oh my God, I saw a deer, I saw a fox, I saw a rabbit, this is alive. And you cannot achieve that when you spray all day.
Yeah.
That's just the comment.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen. So we've talked about how to produce wine sustainably, but then transporting it sustainably is the next challenge. So Clément, can you tell us more about what your company is putting in place to achieve that?
So, as I said previously, I explained some solutions that we currently have out of France with the rail and the biofuel on trucks. And we can also use sustainable marine fuel for the ships. So it's kind of... Indeed, it won't be on the ship will be called Le Havre and to the export market because the biofuel is not available there. But we know that it could be available somewhere else. So we have a composition system in order to use and to burn clean fuel. And that's, even if I know that the producer or the importer would like to be on their shipment, but we have to keep in mind that we have only one atmosphere, and it really depends where you burn the clean, but we have to burn a cleaner fuel in order to improve the CO2 emission. And also there is some interesting initiative and projects. I'm thinking about the Selling Bone project, which are not project actually, because there is 2 services running from north of France to United States. And so that could be also something interesting. Of course, it will be more a niche market, maybe more for premium product, but that's very interesting to follow. And again, as I said, the key point for us is to give full visibility to our customer. The different option with a saving on the CO2 emission and the extra cost if there is some. And Play Collective also is very important. We know that some producer manage to, even if they are small, manage to change their mind of their importers because they really believe into those initiatives. So we can see that it's moving slowly, but at least I think it goes into the right direction. And also, we have also all the big groups in France, and which definitely are leader on these topics because they control the freight and they are really willing to find the best solution. So
it's a little bit like in the wine business where the premium companies are leading by example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just one point, but as far as transportation is concerned, actually the low-end wine are already pretty much optimized because we transport them by bulk, which means that we can ship 260 hectoliters with 120-foot containers. Flexi tank. While you will need 5 40-foot containers, case goods, to ship to the market. And then they can use also lighter bottle into the market. So that's...
You're helping me with my next question there, because we've talked a lot about how the liquid is produced, but then you cannot sell it like that. You have to put it in a bottle. And obviously in the last few years, we talked a lot about the weight of bottles. And be it in wine or in beauty products, very often to create a luxurious image, you use a lot of packaging, very unnecessary packaging, possibly very heavy packaging. And so one of the current challenge is that with everybody trying to lower the weight of the bottles, how do you keep that image of quality, luxury, premium, the one that's going to put stars in your eyes, while remaining sustainable? Which one wants to take the question first? Because it's a tricky one.
No, I think it's again, it interlocks because we've reduced the total amount of glass by 50%.
Okay, what's the average weight of your bottle?
Now it's about 386 grams.
That's very good.
We do have an exception to the rule, but the average it's below 400.
Yeah. And the exception to the rule is probably produced in tiny quantities.
Very small quantities, and it is for our domestic market that, we're developing countries where you want to give your father for Father's Day a gift. It has to,
it has to weigh something.
Feel like a gift. But at the end of the day, when you reduce your use of glass, you obviously your cost of glass is a lot lower. Your cost of shipping it is a lot lower.
Yeah, definitely.
And everything adds up to eventually you have a saving or money that you can allocate to communicate the qualities of the liquid and the qualities of the place and the people that make the wine. And that sometimes is more seductive than any packaging or extra layer of gold that you can put on the case or on the bottle, on the capsule. So it's how you reallocate that saving, that cost saving, for something that a lot of the principals intentionally don't understand marketing. They believe it's just an expense, but you need to convince them that it's actually an investment. To communicating, and that's the way to say, this iconic wine in La Place de Bordeaux, it's in a lightweight bottle because it's consistent with everything we're doing. That takes a lot of communication.
And anyway, the Bordelais are definitely not the worst offenders. I think Jancis said that their average bottle weight for the Grand Cru was about 600 gram, and we've seen bottles coming from some countries weighing more than a kilo.
Made in France that go to other continents and if you look to come back full.
If you look at the bottle weight agreement, they want to reduce the average weight to less than 420. So you're already there.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Because
do you have example, Pauline, of luxury cues that are sustainable, that do not detract from the overall?
Yeah, well, I think there's different way of answering your question, but it's a very interesting one because there's, we know in that premium segment that what the product looks like is really, really important. And you mentioned, Christian, that in some markets, unfortunately, I think in our markets, sorry, I'm based in London and and we're in France, so people understand that, a heavy bottle doesn't necessarily means good quality. You don't need to have a heavy bottle. And you mentioned the Jancis article. I think it had a, thank you, Jancis Robinson, for having, written that article, because I've heard so many winemakers that felt concerned by that article, like, oh gosh, we're not going to be reviewed anymore by Jancis Robinson. We need to do something. So that's a very good example of how gatekeepers can lead the way to change, by the way. So to go back to your original question, I've seen winemakers working really, really hard because, for example, they work with a bottle that to have the sensory vision of being a luxury product, you don't need to have, the line in the bottle that you can see. So some producers use absolutely seamless glass where there's absolutely no line, so that it gives a more luxury feel. That turns out to, lead to more complicated bottling line, because usually the bottling line use that line to turn it around and have the label not put on that line, but next to that line. But they committed to hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop this and to work with the bottling line to actually reduce the weight of this, keep the no line on the bottle and still have the luxury feel into that. So that was again, going back to collaborative, a project they did with the bottling line and themselves to develop the technology to being able to do that. I think the one that comes to mind because it's been talked about so much is the Cheval Blanc new packaging using, woolen wools from
wrappers.
made of wools from the sheep that they use in the estate.
From Adam.
Yeah, so I think in that initiative in particular, it's also how can we redefine what luxury is, and if you think that nature is the true luxury in the good sense, right? Then actually it makes sense. It's a bit like handbags made of, vegetal leather, not vegetables leather.
Handbag made of carrots.
But that's exactly a very, very similar conversation, is how we can convey something expensive and luxury, not using leather anymore, but using other material. So I'm not saying that it's easy, because there are still some markets where it's very difficult to convince consumers otherwise. But I'm seeing a lot of initiative of people dropping all the extra packaging on the bottle of champagne, for example, is another one.
It's moving in the right direction.
It's moving in the right direction. And one of the things that I like to say is when you look at when all the top wineries are really concerned about the problem, are really thinking something is going to come out.
Yes.
It's been exactly the same for vineyard practices. And just like you mentioned in the intro, it's kind of moved quickly. It was very quickly adopted. I think it's the same thing when there's something that really worries, the people that are leading the way, something's going to happen.
I agree with you that when it comes to packaging, a lot seems to have happened in very few years in the very recent past. Before we wrap up, because you've been very generous with your comments, so time is actually flying. There's one point I would like to discuss with you. It's the role of the gatekeepers, because of my previous career in selling, I remember that sometimes I would bring back ideas to the winery and they would go, is it the client that wants it? No, it's just an idea. Okay, just forget it. If the client said it has to be the way, and you remember the big change when it came to closure, when a lot of entry-label wines moved from cork to screw cap, that was driven by the clients who said, we don't want to have cork taint anymore. And then when cork taint was almost eradicated, the client said, we can go back to cork now. So this is quite frequent in the wine industry. Could you tell us a few words about the role, which you touched on earlier actually, the role of the gatekeepers and how they force you to go even further?
If I can rephrase it the other way around. Gatekeepers in developing countries or third world countries refuse the screw cap. Because it's perceived as cheap.
Yes.
And we have, for example, Brazil is a very important market for us. And our entry level is with screw caps for the UK, for the US, and for Brazil. And they're like, no, put it in cork because it's Garzon and it's prestigious and it's expensive, but screw cap is meant to be cheap. And we forced our hand, and we don't even have a proper pyramid in Brazil because they don't buy all of the entry level, the starting estate wines, because they're in screw cap. But we didn't change. We didn't give in and changed into cork. So absolutely, the gatekeeper has all the power, and in monopolies, they exercise that power. And that's how I think it's driving the change. What I think is happening now, and probably your first question of the disaster horizon, is that I don't even know what's in my children's head, apart from excellent values raised by their mother. But there's so much information out there. We don't really know what the next generation wants and how they want it or when they want it. And that's creating a conversation with everybody. What does the consumer want? Because now the gatekeeper doesn't even know. And there's a lot of conversation about, the health aspect and the information aspect, and will they spend the money on the wine, and will they actually drink as much wine as we did, our generation? So today it's the gatekeeper still holds the key, but I don't think the gatekeeper knows what that generation wants, the 25 to 35 or the 20 to 40 that's coming to wine. What do we need to do? Do we need to put cannabis in it? Do we need to put, what do we need to do to attract their attention? And the gatekeeper is absolutely the one that will make the difference.
Yes, but we know that the new generation is pay a lot of attention to all these topics and sustainability. So we can imagine that they want us to go that way. Otherwise, they won't buy the product. At some stage, they will maybe look at how it has been transported, and so I'm pretty sure that. It's at least it gives us a good direction, even maybe long term, but at least I think it's a good direction.
What I wanted to add as well is you mentioned, sometimes gatekeepers threatening and saying we're not going to take on. What I'm seeing is there's a lot of gatekeepers now that go a step further. Is like
they educate.
And I'm going to take the example because we've talked a lot about the winemakers and what people do in wineries and the transportation and everything. I think the retailers, apart from the monopoly, there are some that are doing a great job and are leading by example. And the one that comes to mind to me is the Wine Society in the UK. The Wine Society in the UK is not only saying, they're not saying we're not going to list your wine if your bottle is more than X gram. What they're saying is like, we know that change is difficult, so we've used part of our profit to reinvest in your winery. What do you need to be more sustainable? Do you need a vegetation corridor, not a vegetable corridor? Do you need a vegetation corridor? All right, well, we can give you £1,000 to make that happen. Do you need to have that kind of research to be able to, reduce the weight of your bottle, whatever? We're going to help you as well. So it's not just, making change happen by, threats or like ultimatum. Yeah. It also making it like, okay, we know that change is difficult. What do you need to go to a step further? And I think that it's even, that's an interesting role for a gatekeeper to have. And it's also, again, bottom line, if you want to go back to money, because we know that what makes the world work, they're playing for themselves as well, in that they want to make sure. We know how it's difficult to get supply from wine when you work with a bit of volume, to get a stable, consistent quality level of supply. And that's also one of the things that they're doing, is that because, climate change is threatening the volume that they can get access to year in and year out, by trying to stabilize everything, it's a very good strategy for the long-term future. And again, thank God we've got people with money that think long-term, because we really need them now.
But I agree with you, the Wine Society. Holgarten is another one we can name.
Berry Brothers is doing a lot of things as well.
They are really, and Système Laguette, and
and
the Canadian monopolies.
You have very, very sustainable companies in Japan.
Yes.
That are super strong. And at the end of the day, the gatekeeper can actually pull the chain, which is much easier than pushing a chain.
Yes.
Yeah. If it's just the producers or the logistics, pushing a chain, the chain won't move. But if you pull it, it will move. Yeah. So that's why the gatekeeper is paramount. And there's one level of awareness and commitment in a market as developed as the UK, but that's very, very different in China or in Brazil. But there are markets that are aligned, like Canada is super sustainable, Japan also. And Japan is extremely holistic with the 4 S's and the Kaizen, and they're supervising every step of the process, making sure that you're doing things correctly and safely and environmentally, and those companies like Suntory, they supply to, it's a nightmare. But if you look at the glass half full, they're really helping you to improve your processes. They're really teaching you
Yes.
how to perfection everything you're doing. So absolutely, the future is, of course, is the final consumer, and the younger people are going to demand sustainability. But it's the gatekeeper
As
that
standard.
the gatekeeper is the one that will
Opens the
define it.
floodgates.
Exactly.
Well, I think that was quite a full agenda. So my initial question was a bit disingenuous when I said that we're heading for disaster. But I hope that you've given our listeners enough reasons to be optimistic. It remains to thank you on behalf of Vinexposium for your time today. I know how busy you are on the fair, and it's very much appreciated that you took time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to me. I hope you have a lovely wine Paris, what's
Thank
left
you
of
so
it.
much. Thanks
Make
so
the
much
most
for
of
having
it and
us.
see you next year.